They are not gods. Not in the way you think. They are a secret society of 8 mortals who cheated death itself. A dysfunctional family of outcasts, a crippled beggar, a wandering eccentric, a disgraced general, a lonely girl, who stumbled into eternal life and now hold the power to shatter the world. For over 1,000 years their story has been told as a myth, a charming piece of folklore. But what if it's a warning? A warning about what happens when absolute power falls into the hands of the deeply, hopelessly human. They bicker, they scheme, they get drunk and cause celestial incidents. They are flawed, petty, and brilliant. And they are the only thing standing between order and chaos. But what is the one secret they have guarded for centuries? The story of the great betrayal that almost tore their family apart and nearly dragged heaven and earth down with them. To understand that, you have to understand who they were before they became immortal. They were nobodies. They were the forgotten, the overlooked, the people you'd pass on the street without a second glance. And that is precisely why they are so important. Their story isn't one of divine right or chosen bloodlines. It's the ultimate story of transcendence. It's the radical idea that the path to divinity isn't found in a palace or on a throne, but in the dirt, in the struggle, in the absolute refusal to accept the hand you were dealt. This is the core of Taoism, the ancient Chinese philosophy from which these legends spring. For a Western audience, Taoism can seem abstract. We hear words like the Way or the Tao and think of esoteric philosophy. But at its heart, it's brutally simple. It's a belief in a natural order to the universe, a cosmic current. You can either fight against it your entire life, exhausting yourself in a pointless struggle for control, or you can learn to move with it, to find harmony. And for those who achieve perfect harmony, for those who truly understand their place in the universe, the rules of mortal existence simply cease to apply. The body becomes a vessel of pure energy. Sickness, age, even death itself become irrelevant. You become a Xian, an immortal. And the most famous of all the Xian are the 8. The Bāxiān. They are the rock stars of the Taoist pantheon. Their images are everywhere in Chinese culture, symbols of longevity, prosperity, and good fortune. But they are so much more than lucky charms. Each one represents a different condition of life. The old, the young, the male, the female, the rich, the poor, the noble, the humble. They are a promise that no matter who you are, or where you come from, the path to transcendence is open to you. You don't need to be a king. You just need to understand the way. Their origin is shrouded in the mists of the Tang and Song dynasties, over 1,000 years ago. Their stories were first whispered by poets and playwrights, then solidified by emperors and mystics. They weren't a team assembled by some celestial authority. They found each other, a collection of enlightened souls drawn together across centuries by a shared, impossible reality. They are a found family, bound not by blood, but by the shared experience of leaving humanity behind. And like any family, they have a leader. The de facto patriarch of this chaotic group is a man named Zhong Guo, burly, bare-chested, with a long beard and a magical fan that can revive the dead and transmute stone into silver. He is often seen as the chief of the 8, the one who brings a semblance of order to their ranks. But he wasn't born a leader. He was a failure, a decorated general of the Han dynasty, a man who led his emperor's army into a catastrophic, humiliating defeat against the Tibetan forces. He lost everything. His army was annihilated. His reputation was destroyed. He fled into the mountains, a broken man, expecting to die in exile. He was a man at absolute zero. And it was there, at the lowest point of his life, that his real journey began. He met an old master who saw not a failed soldier, but a spirit ready to be emptied of pride and filled with wisdom. This is the first lesson of the immortals. True power is often forged in the crucible of absolute failure. Then there is the most famous, the most recognizable of them all, Dongbin, often depicted as a handsome, scholarly figure with a sword on his back that can slay demons and render him invisible. He is the patron saint of scholars, but also of barbers for some reason. He is intelligent, but also arrogant, hot-headed, and a notorious womanizer. He is the quintessential flawed hero, a celestial playboy who wields divine power, but is still wrestling with his very human desires. His story is a series of trials, temptations, and failures, a constant battle between his enlightened mind and his worldly heart. He represents the struggle we all face, the gap between who we want to be and who we actually are. And the cast of characters only gets stranger. There is the old beggar Tieguai, or Iron Crutch Li, He is the embodiment of suffering. Disheveled, filthy, leaning on a crutch, he is the most ancient and some say the most powerful of them all. His story is a terrifying tale of astral projection gone wrong. A journey of the soul that left his physical body unprotected, leading to a horrifying discovery. He is a constant, grim reminder that the path to immortality is fraught with peril, that a single mistake can have eternal consequences. There is the gentle Xiangu, the only definitive female member of the group, a young girl who, at the age of 14, vanished into the mountains after a divine being appeared to her in a dream. She was told to grind up a mother-of-pearl stone and consume it to achieve immortality. She did, and she simply stopped being human. She gained eternal youth and the ability to fly, subsisting only on the ethereal substance she had consumed. She represents purity, foresight, and the idea that enlightenment can come to the young and innocent, not just the old and wise. And then there's the rest of this celestial circus. Lan Saiha, the androgynous, slightly mad street performer who carries a basket of flowers and sings songs that mock the fleeting nature of mortal life. A divine fool whose nonsense contains profound truth. Zhang Guo Lao, the ancient hermit who rides a white mule backwards and can fold the animal up like a piece of paper and put it in his pocket. Chao Guozhou, the patron of actors, a man from a corrupt, noble family who renounced his wealth to seek the Tao. And Han Xiangzi, the youthful patron of musicians, who can make flowers bloom in an instant with the sound of his flute. Together, they are a force of nature. Their most legendary feat was the crossing of the sea. Having been invited to a celestial banquet, they arrived at the shore of the East China Sea. Instead of simply flying across on a cloud as immortals normally would, the arrogant Lu Dongbin suggested they each use their own unique powers to cross, just to show off. What followed was pure chaos. Zhongli Quan threw his fan onto the water and used it as a raft. Li Tieguai used his iron crutch. Xiangu used a lotus flower. They turned a simple journey into a spectacular and deeply dangerous display of power. This act of divine arrogance angered the Dragon King of the East Sea, sparking a full-scale war between the Eight Immortals and the entire undersea kingdom. It was a battle that shook the foundations of heaven and earth, a conflict born entirely from their very human pride. This is the central paradox of the Eight Immortals. They have transcended the limits of man, but they have not transcended their own nature. They are a cosmic force, yet they are still driven by ego, by loyalty, by anger, and by love. They save villages from plagues, but they also start wars because someone felt disrespected. They are humanity amplified to a divine scale, with all of our beauty and all of our ugliness. Which brings us back to the betrayal. It wasn't an outside enemy that posed the greatest threat to their existence. It wasn't a dragon king or a celestial demon. The greatest threat came from within, from one of their own. A secret jealousy, a hidden resentment that festered for centuries before finally erupting in an act of treachery that targeted the very source of their power. To understand how this divine family could turn on itself, we must first go back to the beginning. We must go back to the broken general, alone in the wilderness, who was about to be offered a choice: fade into history as a forgotten failure, or accept a new destiny and become the cornerstone of the most powerful group of beings the world would ever know. His decision would set in motion a chain of events spanning 1,000 years, culminating in a single moment of betrayal that would define them all forever. His new existence was a universe of paradoxes. Zhongli Quan, the resurrected general, now walked as a god among mortals, yet he had never felt more alone. Immortality wasn't a gift, it was a sentence. An eternity to reflect on the men he'd lost, the empire he'd failed. The Jade Emperor had granted him a place in the celestial court, a title, a purpose, to be a guardian. But a guardian of what? Against whom? The heavens were vast and silent, the earth below a tapestry of fleeting lives he could no longer touch. He saw the flaw in the celestial plan immediately. One guardian was a target. An army of one is an army of none. He needed allies. He needed soldiers. He needed a team. But where do you find soldiers for a war that hasn't started yet? Who do you recruit for a battle against an enemy you can't name? He scoured the mortal realm, his immortal senses sifting through the billions of souls crying out for meaning. He looked for warriors like himself, for strategists, for men of power and influence. He found thousands, and he rejected them all. They were all tainted by the same ambition, the same hunger for power that had led his own empire to ruin. He realized he wasn't looking for another general. He was looking for the opposite. He was looking for someone untouched by the world of men, someone whose power came not from a sword, but from the soul. And that's when he felt it flicker, a tiny, infinitesimally small pinprick of light in the grand, chaotic noise of humanity. It was a power so pure, so gentle, it was almost undetectable. It emanated from a small village in the south, from a little house at the edge of a bamboo forest. It came from a young girl named Xiangu. To the world, she was nothing special, the daughter of a humble shopkeeper, destined for an arranged marriage and a life of quiet domesticity. But inside, a fire burned. Every night she dreamt of flying. She dreamt of soaring over the mountains, of leaving the dusty streets of her village behind and touching the face of the moon. She felt a profound connection to the natural world, a sense of belonging among the lotus flowers and the whispering bamboo that she never felt among people. She was told these were childish fantasies, that her duty was to her family, to the husband she would one day serve. Her destiny was small, and it was suffocating her. Then one night the dreams changed. A figure appeared to her, cloaked in starlight, its face indistinct but its voice as clear as a temple bell. It told her that her dreams of flight were not fantasies, but memories of a life she was meant to live. It told her the path to true freedom was not in the sky, but within herself. The figure gave her a simple instruction: eat the stone of the mountain, and you shall become as eternal as the mountain itself. When she awoke, a single perfectly smooth piece of mica, shimmering like a captured moonbeam, was resting on her pillow. She knew with a certainty that defied all logic that this was her turning point. This was the escape she had been praying for. While her family slept, she ground the shimmering stone into a fine powder and mixed it with water. It tasted like dust and light. From that day forward, she refused all other food. Her parents were horrified. They pleaded, they threatened, they brought in doctors who proclaimed her mad. But Xiangu was resolute. She consumed nothing but mica powder and, on rare occasions, the iridescent dust of mother of pearl. Instead of withering away, she began to glow. A faint luminescence seemed to emanate from her skin. She grew stronger faster. She could work in her father's shop all day without tiring, her hands moving with an impossible speed and grace. Soon, she no longer needed to sleep, spending her nights meditating in the lotus pond, feeling the energy of the earth itself flowing into her. One morning, as she was walking to the market, she stumbled. But she didn't fall. She simply floated an inch above the ground for a full 10 seconds before settling gently back down. The power was awakening. The villagers began to whisper. They called her a demon, a witch. The same people who had known her since birth now crossed the street to avoid her. Her own family looked at her with a mixture of fear and awe. She was becoming an outcast. But with this isolation came a new clarity. Her senses expanded. She could hear conversations from a mile away. She could see the life force of the plants in the forest. And she began to have visions. She would predict a coming storm with perfect accuracy. She warned a neighbor not to travel, only for him to ignore her and be caught in a landslide. Her most famous prophecy came when she told her mother she was destined not for a mortal husband, but for a life of celestial service. She was no longer just the shopkeeper's daughter. She was becoming something else entirely. It was this burgeoning power, this beacon of purity that Zhongli Quan had sensed. He descended from the heavens, cloaked in the guise of a wandering Taoist priest, and walked into her father's shop. Xiangu was arranging herbs, her movements fluid and silent. When she looked up and saw him, she didn't see a priest. Her expanded senses saw through the disguise. She saw the ancient, weary soul of a warrior. She saw the golden light of divinity, and she saw the loneliness that clung to him like a shroud. Zhongli Quan spoke first. He didn't ask about her powers. He didn't question her strange diet. He simply looked at the lotus flower she had tucked behind her ear and said, "A beautiful flower, but it will fade. Have you ever wished for one that blooms for eternity?" Xiangu smiled, a gesture of profound and ancient wisdom that seemed impossible on such a young face. "I have," she replied, "and I've learned that to find it, you must become the garden, not the gardener." In that moment, Zhongli knew his search was over. Here was a power born not of ambition or violence, but of patience, purity, and a deep, abiding connection to the universe itself. She was the balance to his fire, the calm to his storm. He told her who he was, what he was becoming, and the mission he had undertaken. He offered her a place at his side, not as a follower but as a founder, an equal, a chance to protect the mortal realm she so deeply loved, from threats it could not yet imagine. To the shock of her family and the terror of her village, she accepted without hesitation. Her destiny had arrived. She picked a single perfect lotus from her pond, a flower that in her hands would never wilt or die, and prepared to leave her mortal life behind forever. As she stood at the edge of the village, ready to ascend with Zhongli, her mother ran to her, weeping, begging her not to go. Xiangu simply touched her mother's cheek. In that touch, a lifetime of love and gratitude was conveyed, but also of finality. As they rose into the clouds, Zhongli Quan felt a flicker of hope for the first time in centuries. He had his first ally. The foundation was laid. But as they passed through the celestial gates, Xiangu, the girl who could see the threads of fate, suddenly grew quiet. A shadow passed over her face. "What is it?" Zhongli asked, his battle-honed instincts screaming that something was wrong. She looked at him, her eyes filled not with the joy of her ascension, but with a deep and terrible sorrow. "I see our future," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I see 8 of us. I see a brotherhood. And I see a sword not of an enemy, but of a friend, plunged into the back of the one who trusts him most." Before Zhongli could ask what she meant, a sound echoed across the heavens. It was the sound of a flute, a haunting, beautiful, and impossibly sad melody that seemed to carry all the scholarly ambition and bitter failure of the mortal world within its notes. The music was coming from the east, and it was getting closer. The sound resolved itself not into a person, but into a presence. A young man, almost a boy, walked out of the mists. He was dressed in the simple, elegant robes of a scholar, but they were worn with the casual indifference of someone who had long forgotten the concerns of status or appearance. In his hands, he held a simple jade flute, and it was from this instrument that the soul-stirring melody poured forth. His eyes were closed, not in sleep, but in a state of profound concentration, as if he wasn't just playing the music, but listening to it, discovering it at the very same moment he was creating it. This was Han Xiangzi, the eternal wanderer, the patron of musicians. But to understand his music, you have to understand his silence. To understand his immortality, you have to understand the life he so willingly left behind. Han Xiangzi was born into a world of ink brushes, political maneuvering, and crushing expectation. His uncle was none other than Han Yu, one of the most famous poets and government officials in the entire history of the Tang dynasty. Think of him as a combination of a celebrated poet laureate and a powerful senator, a man whose every word could shape the culture and politics of the empire. And all he wanted, all he demanded, was for his brilliant young nephew to follow in his footsteps. He wanted Han Xiangzi to study the Confucian classics, to pass the imperial examinations, to climb the ladder of bureaucracy, to become a man of consequence. But Han Xiangzi was different. While other boys were memorizing texts on law and administration, he was trying to hear the language of the wind in the trees. While they debated political strategy, he was contemplating the silent wisdom of a flowing river. He wasn't lazy or unintelligent. In fact, he was unervingly brilliant. He could grasp complex philosophical concepts in an instant. The problem was, he wasn't interested in the questions of man. He was interested in the questions of the universe. He was obsessed with the Tao, the fundamental, ineffable principle that underpins all of existence. This drove his uncle Han Yu to the brink of madness. He saw it as a colossal waste of talent, a youthful rebellion that had gone on for far too long. He'd shout, "The world is here. Power, wealth, respect. It's all right in front of you. And you're chasing shadows and listening to the wind. You must build a life, a career." And Han Xiangzi would simply smile, a serene, almost frustratingly calm smile, and reply, "But uncle, what is a career compared to eternity? What is a life, if not a single breath in the life of the cosmos?" The breaking point came during a harsh winter. Han Yu, celebrating his birthday with a grand banquet for all the city's most important officials, decided to publicly shame his nephew into conforming. He called Han Xiangzi to the center of the hall. The room fell silent. Everyone knew of the young man's strange inclinations. "Nephew," Han Yu began, his voice dripping with condescension, "you claim to have mastered the secrets of the universe. You claim powers beyond those of mortal men. A simple trick, then. Show these good men your magic." Can you, with all your Taoist nonsense, make a flower bloom for my birthday? In the dead of winter. Laughter rippled through the hall. It was a cruel, impossible request. The ground outside was frozen solid, the trees bare and skeletal. Han Xiangzi simply bowed. He took an empty flower pot, filled it with soil and placed it on the floor. He covered it with a silk cloth. The officials smirked and whispered, expecting a cheap parlor trick. Han Xiangzi closed his eyes. He didn't chant. He didn't make grand gestures. He just was. He stood there in perfect stillness, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. After a few moments, he lifted the cloth. From the barren soil, a single green stalk had emerged. And as everyone watched, mouths agape, the stalk grew, sprouting leaves and then a tight bud. The bud swelled with color, a vibrant, impossible magenta, and then slowly unfurled into a magnificent peony, blooming in perfect, fragrant defiance of the frozen world outside. A stunned silence fell over the banquet, but that wasn't the true miracle. On two of the central petals, written in delicate, golden calligraphy, were two lines of a poem. Han Yu, the master poet, leaned in to read them. The poem read, "Clouds shroud the Qinling Mountains, where is my home? Deep snows block the lawn pass, my horse will not go." Han Yu recoiled as if struck. It was beautiful poetry, but it made no sense. The Qinling Mountains and the lawn pass were hundreds of miles to the south, places of exile for disgraced officials. It was a dark and ominous verse. "What is the meaning of this gibberish?" he roared, trying to regain control. Han Xiangzi just smiled that same peaceful smile. "Its meaning is not yet ripe, uncle. But in time you will understand." With that, he bowed, turned, and walked out of the banquet hall, leaving the blooming flower, the stunned officials, and his old life behind him forever. He wandered into the wilderness, seeking not a destination, but a state of being. And it was there he found his teacher. The flamboyant, wine-loving swordsman, Lu Dongbin, recognized the spark of transcendence in the young scholar. He took Han Xiangzi under his wing, teaching him to channel his innate understanding of the Tao. The final lesson took place on one of the mythical peaches of immortality, a tree that grew on the celestial Mount Penglai and fruited only once every 3,000 years. Lu Dongbin instructed Han Xiangzi to climb the ancient, gnarled tree. As the young man reached for the divine fruit, he lost his footing. He fell. He fell through the clouds, through the space between worlds, a terrifying, exhilarating plunge. But as he fell, the world of mortal cares fell away from him. The ambition of his uncle, the expectations of society, the fear of failure, the fear of death, it all burned away in the long drop. By the time he landed, unharmed, on the earth below, he was no longer just Han Xiangzi the scholar. He was Han Xiangzi the immortal. He picked up a piece of bamboo, carved it into a flute, and began to play his first celestial melody. Years later, Han Yu, the powerful official, made a political enemy of the emperor. For his dissent, he was stripped of his rank and exiled to the farthest, most desolate southern provinces. As his lonely procession made its way through the bitter winter, a massive blizzard descended, blocking his path. He found himself stranded, cold and alone in a mountain pass. A local told him its name, the Lan Pass. Staring at the impassable wall of snow before him, his horse refusing to move, the words from the peony petal echoed in his mind, clear as a temple bell. "Deep snows block the Lan Pass, my horse will not go." Suddenly, a figure appeared through the swirling snow. It was Han Xiangzi, unchanged by the years, holding his jade flute. He looked at his humbled, shivering uncle, not with triumph but with compassion. He had seen his uncle's fate written in the fabric of the Tao all those years ago. He had come not to gloat, but to offer comfort. Han Xiangzi's music then is not just sound. It's the sound of destiny. It is the melody of a life that chose a different path. The path of the artist, the mystic, the dreamer, who finds a power greater than any emperor's decree in the simple act of creating beauty. His song is a reminder that the world you see is not the only one that exists. And as his haunting melody now drifted across the mists where the immortals were gathering, it did more than just announce his arrival. It acted as a beacon. The sound cut through the veil, a call to those who were listening. And someone was. The beautiful, ethereal notes were suddenly shattered by a different sound entirely. A harsh grating noise. The rhythmic, agonizingly slow thump, scrape, of something heavy being dragged across the stone. It was the sound of a crutch and a broken body. The figure that emerged from the shadows was a vision of profound suffering. He was a beggar, his face grimy and etched with the kind of deep lines that only come from a life of hardship. His hair was a tangled mess, held in place by a simple golden band that seemed strangely out of place. His clothes were rags, barely clinging to a skeletal frame. One of his legs was twisted and useless, forcing him to lean heavily on a sturdy iron crutch that bit into the celestial stone with every agonizing step. In his other hand, he clutched a large gourd, its surface worn smooth from years of use. This was Tieguai, Iron Crutch Li. The other immortals, figures of grace and power, fell silent. Their initial annoyance at the interruption turned to stunned disbelief. Who was this wretched creature? How had he breached the sacred defenses of Mount Kunlun to crash their divine party? But then, a flicker of recognition passed through the eyes of the Jade Emperor. He knew this soul, if not this broken body, because the man dragging himself forward was not always a disfigured beggar. He was once known by another name, Xian, and he had been one of the most handsome, charismatic, and powerful Taoist masters to ever walk the earth. Xian was a man who seemed to have been blessed by the heavens from birth. He was brilliant, disciplined, and possessed an almost supernatural understanding of the Tao, the fundamental nature of the universe. He spent his days in quiet contemplation, mastering alchemy, and perfecting the art of spiritual cultivation. His goal was nothing less than transcendence, to shed his mortal coil and achieve true immortality. After decades of tireless effort, he was on the verge of succeeding. One day, while deep in meditation, he received a celestial summons. The great sage Laozi, the very founder of Taoism, had invited him for a spiritual conference on the sacred Mount Hua. This was the ultimate honor, a meeting of the greatest minds in the celestial bureaucracy. But there was a catch. The journey was not one of the body, but of the spirit. Xian would have to leave his physical form behind. He called for his most trusted apprentice. "I am about to embark on a journey of the soul," he explained. "My spirit will leave my body to commune with the great Laozi. I will be gone for 7 days. Your task is simple, but it is the most important I have ever given you. Guard my body. Protect it from harm, from insects, from animals. Do not let anything disturb it. In 7 days I will return. Do you understand?" The apprentice, filled with awe and a deep sense of duty, bowed low. "I will guard it with my life, master." And so Xian sat in the lotus position, closed his eyes, and his spirit, a shimmering wisp of light, drifted free from his body, soaring through the clouds towards the distant peaks of Mount Hua. His physical form remained behind, perfectly still, a flawless statue of a man at peace. For 6 days, the apprentice was a perfect guardian. He sat vigil, fending off flies and ensuring his master's body remained undisturbed. He meditated, he chanted, he waited. But on the evening of the 6th day, a frantic messenger arrived from his home village. The news was dire. His mother was on her deathbed and she was crying out for him. The apprentice was torn. He had a sacred duty to his master, a promise to guard this empty vessel until the spirit returned. But he also had a filial duty to his mother, a duty to be by her side in her final moments. He wrestled with his conscience. His master was a powerful immortal to be. Surely he would understand. His mother was a mortal woman, and this was his last chance to see her. The pull of family, of love and loss was too strong. He looked at his master's body. It had been 6 days. There was no breath, no heartbeat. For all intents and purposes, it was a corpse. What if his master wasn't coming back? What if the journey had taken longer than expected? Or something had gone wrong? He couldn't leave the body to rot. With a heavy heart and tears streaming down his face, he made a terrible decision. Believing his master was gone forever, he prepared a funeral pyre, cremated the body, and hurried home to his dying mother. 1 day later, on the 7th day, just as promised, the spirit of Xian returned from Mount Hua, his mind buzzing with celestial knowledge and cosmic secrets. He floated down from the heavens, eager to re-inhabit his body and process all he had learned. But as he approached his home, a cold dread filled his ethereal form. He could smell smoke. He found only a pile of cooling ashes. Panic, a raw and primal terror that a soul should not be able to feel, seized him. His body, his anchor to the mortal world, The product of decades of cultivation was gone, destroyed. He was now a homeless spirit, a ghost with no place to go. Without a physical form, his spiritual energy would soon dissipate like smoke in the wind, and he would cease to exist entirely. He frantically searched the nearby countryside, a desperate wisp of consciousness looking for a new home. He needed a vessel, any vessel. As his energy began to fade, his vision of the world growing dim, he stumbled upon a body lying in the forest. It was a beggar, a man who had just starved to death. The corpse was grotesque, filthy, emaciated, with a wild beard, a pointed head, and a crippled leg. Li Xian's spirit recoiled in disgust. This was a prison of flesh, a broken and ugly shell. To inhabit this would be a mockery of his former self, a cruel joke played by fate. But he had no choice. It was either this or oblivion. As his last vestiges of power waned, he plunged his spirit into the dead beggar's form. The shock was electric. He gasped, a ragged, rattling breath filling lungs that had been still for hours. He opened his eyes, the world swimming back into a blurry, painful focus. He tried to stand, but the useless leg buckled beneath him, sending a jolt of agony through his new body. He was trapped. This was his reality now. In a fit of rage and despair, he slammed his fist on the ground. But as the anger subsided, something else took its place. Acceptance. He was still alive. His knowledge, his power, his spirit, they were all still intact, merely housed in a different container. He looked at his wretched form not with disgust, but with a new sense of purpose. Laozi, seeing his plight from the heavens, descended to comfort him. He gifted Li Xian a magical iron crutch, telling him it would allow him to walk anywhere, even across oceans and mountains. He also gave him the gourd, filled not with wine, but with a powerful elixir, a medicine that could cure any ailment. Laozi told him that his trial was not a punishment but a test. True enlightenment wasn't about maintaining a perfect physical form. It was about transcending the physical altogether. It was about compassion. And in that moment Li Xian died and Li Tieguai was born. Iron Crutch Li. He embraced his new identity. His ugly appearance became a tool, allowing him to walk among the poor, the sick, and the forgotten without intimidation. He was no longer a remote, handsome scholar. He was one of them. He used the medicine in his gourd to heal the sick, to ease suffering wherever he found it. He, who had lost his own body, became the ultimate physician of the bodies and souls of others. He is the symbol of resilience, the patron of the sick, the needy, and the oppressed. A constant, powerful reminder that the vessel doesn't matter. It is the spirit within, the power to turn personal tragedy into a source of universal compassion, that grants true immortality. He is the proof that even from the ashes of utter devastation, a new kind of power can be born, a power found not in perfection, but in the beautiful, stubborn strength of the broken. But what if this strength isn't born from being broken, but from bending the very rules of reality itself? What if immortality isn't about overcoming a physical flaw, but about mastering the flow of time? To understand this, we must meet the most eccentric, the most enigmatic, and perhaps the oldest of all the immortals. His name is Zhang Guo Lao, and he is the master of the unpredictable. Picture this: an old man with a long white beard and a mischievous twinkle in his eye, riding a white mule. Nothing too strange there for ancient China, except he's riding it backwards. He faces where he has been, not where he is going, yet his mule carries him forward with unerring certainty. This single, bizarre image is the key to understanding everything about him. Zhang Guo Lao is not just an old man. He is old age personified, a living testament to the wisdom that comes only from looking back. His origins are shrouded in mystery. Some say he lived as a hermit during the Tang dynasty in the 7th and 8th centuries. Others claim he was already ancient by then, a figure from a much earlier, forgotten time. Powerful emperors heard tales of this recluse who possessed profound Taoist secrets. Emperor Taizong and later the formidable Empress Wu Ziqian sent messengers deep into the mountains, bearing lavish gifts and imperial decrees, summoning him to court. They wanted his knowledge, his secrets to longevity. But Zhang Guo Lao had no interest in worldly power. He was a master of avoidance. Upon hearing the imperial summons, he would simply drop dead. His body would decay with shocking speed, convincing the horrified officials to turn back. But as soon as they were gone, He would spring back to life perfectly fine and continue his reclusive existence. He could not be bought, he could not be commanded, and he could not be caught. He existed outside the grasp of mortal authority. And then there was his mule. This was no ordinary animal. It was said to be a magical creation, capable of traveling thousands of miles in a single day without tiring. And when Zhang Guo Lao reached his destination, he wouldn't tie it to a post or lead it to a stable. He would simply fold it up, like a piece of paper, and slip it into his pocket. When he was ready to travel again, he would take out the paper donkey, spray it with a mouthful of water, and it would spring back to its full size, ready for the next journey. This isn't just a whimsical party trick. It's a profound statement. Zhang Guo Lao's power is one of effortless transformation. He turns life into death and death back into life. He turns a living creature into a piece of paper, and paper back into a living creature. To him, the rigid laws of physics that govern our world are merely suggestions. He is so in tune with the Tao, the fundamental flow of the universe, that he can playfully nudge reality itself. But let's return to that central image. Riding backwards. Why? In our modern, relentlessly forward-looking world, this seems insane. We are obsessed with progress, with the next quarter, the next goal, the next destination. We believe the future is all that matters. Zhang Guo Lao completely rejects this. By facing the past, he is demonstrating a deeper wisdom. He understands that everything that is to come is born from what has already been. The path ahead is forged by the road behind. He has such mastery over his own destiny, such trust in the Tao, that he doesn't need to anxiously stare at what's coming. He can relax, reflect on the journey so far, and trust that he will end up exactly where he needs to be. It's a radical act of faith and confidence. He reminds us that true wisdom isn't about predicting the future, but about deeply understanding the past. He is the patron of the elderly, a symbol that age is not a decline, but an accumulation of power, perspective, and a touch of magical mischief. From the ancient, eccentric sage who defies time, we turn to the embodiment of timeless grace. From the man who rides backwards into the future, we meet the woman who found her path by looking inward, towards a light of absolute purity. She is Xiangu, the sole undisputed female deity among the Eight Immortals. Her story begins not with cosmic battles or grand pronouncements, but in the quiet life of a young girl in the Tang dynasty. While the other immortals were scholars, generals, or beggars, she was simply the daughter of a shopkeeper. Her path to divinity wasn't found on a battlefield or in a royal court, but in a dream. One night, a divine being appeared to her and gave her a strange instruction. Find a mother-of-pearl stone in the mountains, grind it into a fine powder, and consume it. She obeyed. Upon eating the shimmering powder, something incredible happened. Her body became ethereal, almost weightless. The mortal need for food fell away from her completely. She vowed to remain a virgin, dedicating her life to a higher spiritual purpose. She would spend her days floating through the mountains, gathering herbs and fruits not for herself, but for her mother and for the local sick and poor. Her nourishment came from a more celestial source, the Tao itself, the very essence of the universe. As her power grew, she gained the ability to travel vast distances in an instant, and to predict the fortunes of others with stunning accuracy. She became a figure of local renown, a beacon of gentle power and compassion. Her symbol, the one she is almost never seen without, is the lotus flower. This is no accident. The lotus is one of the most powerful symbols in Eastern philosophy. It is a flower that grows from the dark, murky mud at the bottom of a pond, yet rises through the water to blossom on the surface, perfectly clean, pure, and beautiful. It represents enlightenment, the ability to live in a flawed, messy world while remaining untouched by its corruption. The lotus is Xiangu. She is proof that spiritual purity can be cultivated and maintained even amidst the mud of mortal existence. Like Zhang Guo Lao, her growing fame eventually reached the ears of the powerful Empress Wu Zetian. The Empress, fascinated by this enlightened woman, summoned her to the imperial capital. Xiangu, ever obedient and graceful, began the journey. But she would never arrive. Midway to the palace, in front of numerous witnesses, she simply vanished into thin air. She ascended to her rightful place as an immortal, demonstrating once again that true divinity cannot be summoned or controlled by earthly power. It operates on a different plane entirely. Xiangu provides a crucial balance to the group. Where others are boisterous, she is serene. Where others are tricksters, she is a source of earnest compassion. She is the patron of women and is often prayed to for help in matters of the home and family. She represents a different kind of strength, not the strength of a sword or a magic gourd, but the unshakable strength of spiritual fortitude. She shows that the path to immortality doesn't always require a grand, dramatic quest. Sometimes it is a quiet, internal journey of discipline, purity, and unwavering compassion for others. Together, Zhang Guo Lao and Xiangu paint a richer picture of what it means to be immortal. One is the mischievous, time-bending sage who finds wisdom by looking back. The other is the gentle, graceful maiden who finds power by looking within. They show us that the divine can be found in the eccentric old man with a paper donkey, and in the serene young woman with a single lotus flower. But the pantheon is far from complete. For what happens when the path to immortality is paved not with magic or purity, but with music? What happens when the very sound of a flute can shatter illusions and reveal the secrets of the universe? That is the story of the celestial musician, and the next step on our journey. His name was Han Xiangzi, and while his path to immortality was paved with music, his story begins with a bitter, soul-crushing family argument. An argument that echoes through the ages, one you might even recognize: the dreamer versus the pragmatist, the artist versus the bureaucrat, the free spirit versus the man who lives by the rules. In one corner we have his granduncle, Han Yu, and you have to understand Han Yu wasn't just some guy. He was a titan of the Tang dynasty, a celebrated poet, a brilliant scholar, and a high-ranking government official. He was the living embodiment of Confucian ideals: order, discipline, duty to the state, and a deep-seated suspicion of anything that smacked of mysticism or the supernatural. To Han Yu, the world was a complex but ultimately understandable machine, and his job was to help it run smoothly. There was no room for nonsense. And in the other corner was his nephew, Han Xiangzi, a young man who was, to his uncle's profound and unending frustration, pure, uncut, grade-A nonsense. While other young men of his station were poring over classic texts, preparing for the grueling civil service exams that were the only path to success, Han Xiangzi was wandering. He'd disappear into the mountains for weeks, shunning fancy clothes for the simple robes of a Taoist ascetic. He had no interest in money, no ambition for power, no desire for a comfortable life. All he cared about was his flute, and seeking the Tao. You can just picture the dinner conversations. Han Yu exasperated, shouting, "The Tao doesn't pay the bills. A flute won't earn you a promotion. When are you going to get serious about your life?" And Han Xiangzi would just smile that serene, maddeningly calm smile, and perhaps play a little tune that made the birds outside the window fall silent, listening. To his uncle, this wasn't just youthful rebellion. It was a profound failure, a stain on the family's reputation. He saw his nephew throwing away every advantage, every opportunity, for a childish fantasy. The tension reached a breaking point. Han Xiangzi was brought before his uncle, who gave him an ultimatum: abandon this foolish quest for the Tao or be disowned. Han Xiangzi, however, wasn't there to argue. He simply said, "Uncle, you value the predictable, but my path deals in a different kind of power. Let me show you." He then performed a feat that has become legendary. He took an ordinary pot of dirt, and with a wave of his hand, caused two magnificent peonies to sprout and bloom in an instant, right there in the middle of winter. The court was stunned, but Han Xiangzi wasn't done. He pointed to the petals. Woven into the delicate flowers in characters of gold was a poem. It read, "Clouds shroud the Qinling Mountains, where is my home? Snows block the pass at Longguan, my horse will not go." Han Yu scoffed. It was a pretty trick, a clever illusion, but the poem was meaningless gibberish. He dismissed his nephew as a charlatan and a lost cause, and washed his hands of him. Han Xiangzi, free from his family obligations, simply bowed and walked away, disappearing back into the wilderness to follow his true teacher, the immortal Lu Dongbin. Under Lu Dongbin's tutelage, Han Xiangzi learned to channel the Tao through his music. His flute was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of his will, a tool to interface with the very fabric of reality. He learned that the universe wasn't a machine, as his uncle believed. It was a song, a grand, impossibly complex symphony of vibrating energies. And with his flute he could play along. He could compose his own verses. He could play a melody that would coax life from barren soil. or a dirge that could quiet a raging storm. His final test was both terrifying and beautiful. While climbing a mythical cosmic peach tree, the fruit of which grants immortality, his foot slipped. He plummeted from an impossible height, falling through the clouds, the sky a blur above him. But as he fell, he didn't scream. He didn't panic. He simply accepted it. In that moment of total surrender, of letting go of everything, fear, desire, even the will to live, he achieved enlightenment. He didn't hit the ground. He simply stopped falling. He had become weightless, timeless. He had become an immortal. Now let's go back to his uncle Han Yu, the man of logic and reason. Years passed. As it happens in the cutthroat world of imperial politics, Han Yu eventually fell out of favor with the emperor. He was stripped of his titles and exiled to a remote, barely civilized post in the damp southern frontier. It was a death sentence in slow motion. As his lonely caravan made its way south, it was caught in a sudden freakish blizzard high in the mountains. The snow piled up in massive drifts. It was impassable. They were trapped, freezing, with supplies running low. Despair began to set in. Han Yu, the great scholar, the master of order, was going to die a pointless, frozen death in the middle of nowhere. And then, through the howling wind, he heard a sound. A single, clear, impossible note. A melody from a flute. A figure emerged from the blizzard, dressed in simple Taoist robes, seemingly unaffected by the bitter cold. It was his nephew, Han Xiangzi. He smiled that same serene smile. "Uncle," he said, "it seems you found the place from the poem." And Han Yu's blood ran cold as he remembered the words from the peonies years ago. "Snows block the pass at Longguan, my horse will not go." They were trapped at Longguan Pass. The gibberish was a prophecy. The magic trick was a warning. In that moment, everything Han Yu believed about the world shattered. The rigid, predictable machine he had dedicated his life to serving was, in fact, filled with a magic he had been too blind to see. Han Xiangzi, with a simple tune on his flute, parted the snow, cleared the path, and saved his uncle's life. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't need to. The lesson was complete. Han Yu survived his exile and was eventually pardoned, but he was a changed man, one who now understood that there were deeper truths than those found in official documents. Han Xiangzi, the immortal, became the patron saint of musicians, artists, and anyone who dares to walk a different path. His symbol is the jade flute, the dizzy, an instrument whose power lies not in force but in harmony. He teaches us that art is not a frivolous distraction. It is a sacred language. It is a way of speaking with the universe itself. His story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the most profound wisdom doesn't come from dusty scrolls or imperial edicts, but from the simple, beautiful, and world-altering power of a single perfect song. He represents the triumph of the spirit over the mundane, the artist over the bureaucrat. But what if your path to immortality isn't paved with art or philosophy? What if it's forged not in a mountain monastery, but in the filth of the streets? What if your power comes not from beauty and harmony, but from pain, suffering, and a refusal to die? Our next immortal is not a refined scholar or a graceful musician. He is a beggar, a cripple, a figure of pity and scorn whose story is one of the most bizarre and inspiring of them all. The story of a soul so stubborn, it found a new body when its old one was destroyed. His name, before he was known by the creak of his crutch, was Li Xian, and he was everything the beggar was not. In the mortal world, Li Xian was a striking figure, tall, handsome, with an intellect that burned as brightly as his features. He was a dedicated student of the Tao, the fundamental way of the universe. He spent his days in deep meditation, seeking to unravel the mysteries of existence, to peel back the veil of reality and glimpse the eternal truth that lay beyond. His piety and wisdom became so renowned that they reached the ears of the highest celestial beings. One day, he received a summons from the great sage Laozi himself, the legendary founder of Taoism. Laozi invited Li Xian's spirit to journey with him to the celestial mountains, a place of pure energy and cosmic understanding, a realm beyond the comprehension of ordinary men. This was the ultimate honor, the culmination of a lifetime of devotion, but it came with a risk. To make such a journey, his spirit would have to leave his physical body behind. It was a practice known to the highest level adepts, a form of spiritual travel where the soul untethers itself from its mortal coil. Before departing, Li Xian called his most trusted disciple to his side. He instructed him carefully, "Guard my body. I will be gone for 7 days. Do not move it, do not disturb it. My spirit will be wandering the heavens. If, by the end of the 7th day, I have not returned, it will mean my spirit has joined the celestial court forever. Only then are you to cremate my body." The disciple, loyal and reverent, swore an oath to protect his master's earthly form with his life. Li Xian then sat in a meditative posture, closed his eyes, and his spirit slipped from his body like a hand from a glove, soaring into the heavens to meet Laozi. For days, the disciple stood vigil. He watched over the still, silent form of his master, a perfect, unmoving statue. 1 day passed, then 2, then 5, then 6. The disciple's faith was unwavering. His master would return. But on the evening of the 6th day, a frantic messenger arrived, breathless and pale. The disciple's mother, who lived in a village far away, had been struck by a sudden, grave illness. She was on her deathbed, calling out for her son. The disciple was shattered. He was caught in an impossible conflict. On one hand, his sacred oath to his master, a man on the verge of godhood. On the other, the most fundamental human bond, filial piety, the duty of a son to his dying mother. He paced back and forth, his mind a whirlwind of grief and anxiety. He looked at his master's body. It had been 6.5 days. There was no breath, no sign of life. Surely, he thought, his master's spirit had already ascended. He wouldn't be returning. What good was it to guard an empty shell when his own mother needed him? With a heavy heart and tears streaming down his face, he made a decision. He convinced himself that his master was gone for good. He built a pyre, gently placed Li Xian's body upon it, and set it alight. As the flames consumed the handsome form of the scholar, the disciple said a final prayer, and then ran as fast as his legs could carry him toward his mother's village. At that very moment, high above in the celestial realm, Li Xian was bidding farewell to Laozi. His journey was complete, his understanding deepened. His spirit descended back toward the mortal plane, arriving right on schedule, at the dawn of the 7th day. He flew towards his home, ready to re-inhabit his body, ready to process the cosmic wonders he had witnessed. But when he arrived, he was met with a scene of horror. His home was empty, his body was gone. In its place was nothing but a pile of warm ashes and the lingering smell of smoke. A wave of pure panic, a feeling no immortal should ever know, washed over his spirit. He was a ghost, a soul without a vessel. Without a body to anchor it, his spirit would soon dissipate into nothingness, scattered like dust on the wind. His chance at immortality, his very existence, was about to be extinguished because of a tragic misunderstanding. Frantically, his disembodied consciousness swept through the nearby forest, searching for a new home. Any home. The laws of nature were closing in. He had only minutes. He searched for the body of a recently deceased animal, a person, anything that could contain his powerful spirit. And then he found one. Lying under a tree, stiff and cold, was the corpse of a beggar who had just starved to death. The man was hideous. His face was dark and brutish, his hair a tangled mess. One of his legs was crippled and twisted. His clothes were rags. He was everything Li Xian was not. But there was no time. It was this or non-existence. With a final desperate act of will, Li Xian's spirit plunged into the beggar's corpse. The shock was electric. He felt the sudden crushing weight of flesh and bone. He felt the gnawing hunger in the beggar's stomach, the searing pain in the mangled leg. He opened his eyes, the beggar's eyes, and saw the world through a dim, unfamiliar haze. He tried to stand, but the useless leg buckled beneath him. He stumbled, catching himself on a thick tree branch, which he broke off to use as a crude support. He hobbled to a nearby pond and looked at his reflection. The face that stared back was not his own. It was the face of a monster, a wretch. The handsome, refined scholar was gone forever. In his place was a grotesque cripple. A scream of pure anguish and despair tore from his new throat. In his moment of deepest agony, a brilliant light shone from the heavens. Laozi descended, his presence calm and reassuring. He looked upon the distraught Li Xian and explained that this was not a punishment, but a test. The Tao does not judge the outer shell, but the inner spirit. True immortality lies not in a handsome face or a strong body, but in a perfected soul. To help him on his new path, Laozi gifted him an indestructible iron crutch to replace his tree branch. He also gave him a magical gourd, filled with medicine that could cure any illness and ease all suffering. In that moment, Li Xian died and Li Tieguai, Iron Crutch Li, was born. He accepted his new form not as a curse, but as a symbol of his purpose. He would now wander the earth, a beggar in appearance but a god in spirit. He uses the magical medicines in his gourd to heal the sick and aid the poor, often appearing in the dead of night to leave remedies for those in need. His ugly form serves as a constant reminder to all: never judge a person by their appearance. The most wretched-looking beggar on the street might just be an immortal in disguise, a soul of immense power and compassion. Li Tieguai, the first of the 8 to achieve immortality, embodies the idea that true worth is invisible to the eye. His story is a profound lesson in transformation and perception. But while he found the Tao through intense study and a bizarre spiritual accident, the next immortal we'll meet found it through a completely different path. Not through discipline but through pure, unadulterated joy. He is the smiling, pot-bellied immortal of fortune and contentment, a man who achieved divinity simply by being happy. His name is Zhongli Quan, and before he was an immortal, he was the opposite of happy. He was a general, a decorated, ambitious 5-star general of the Han Dynasty, a man defined by rigid discipline, battlefield strategy, and the immense weight of an empire on his shoulders. His belly wasn't a symbol of contentment, but of power and status. He had it all: fame, wealth, the emperor's favor. He was the guy who had climbed the ladder of success all the way to the top. And then, in a single catastrophic battle, the ladder was kicked out from under him. He was sent to fight against the Tibetan forces, leading a massive army. But he was betrayed, outmaneuvered, and utterly crushed. His army was annihilated. His reputation, his honor, his entire identity was wiped out in a storm of arrows and blood. He was a failure, a fugitive. He fled the battlefield with nothing but the clothes on his back and the bitter taste of defeat. He ran until his legs gave out, hiding in the remote, unforgiving mountains, a broken man with no future. And it was there, at his absolute lowest point, that his real story begins. Hiding in a forest, he stumbled upon a foreign-looking old man, a mysterious figure who seemed completely at peace in the harsh wilderness. This was a Taoist master, one who could see beyond the disgraced general and into the soul of the man. He saw not a failure, but a vessel now empty enough to be filled with true wisdom. The master took Zhongli in and began to teach him, not the art of war but the art of living. He taught him the secrets of alchemy, the long-breathing exercises that harmonize the body with the universe, and the philosophy of the Tao. And Zhongli Quan, the man who had lost everything he thought he valued, began to find everything that actually mattered. He learned that his ambition had been a cage, his desire for victory a poison, his attachment to his reputation a heavy chain around his neck. As he let go of the general, he became himself. He traded his armor for simple robes. He let his hair grow long and his belly grow soft. That belly was no longer a symbol of imperial excess. It became a symbol of spiritual fulfillment, of having digested the profound secrets of the cosmos. The fan he now carried wasn't for cooling himself in a stuffy courtroom. It was a magical artifact, imbued with the power to revive the dead and transmute stone into silver and gold. Zhongli Quan achieved immortality not by winning a great battle, but by losing one. He found enlightenment not at the peak of his success, but in the depths of his failure. His journey teaches us a powerful, paradoxical lesson. Sometimes you have to lose everything to gain the universe. He became the leader of the 8 Immortals, a guide who would later seek out and enlighten others, because he understood the path better than anyone. He had walked the road of worldly success and found it a dead end, and then stumbled onto the hidden trail of spiritual joy that led to eternity. His brand of immortality is a profound one, born from deep philosophical change. But not all immortals are so serious. Some are just weird. And our next one is perhaps the strangest of them all. He's a figure of whimsical mystery, an eccentric hermit whose greatest power seems to be a complete and utter refusal to take the world seriously. His name is Zhang Guo Lao, and he is the embodiment of ancient, unpredictable wisdom. The first thing you'd notice about him is how he travels. He rides a magical white donkey. Nothing too strange there for an immortal, except he rides it backwards. Think about that for a second. Why would anyone ride a donkey backwards? When asked, Zhang Guo Lao would simply say that looking forward, you see the same things over and over. But looking backwards, you can see the path that has been traveled. He preferred to watch history unfold behind him. It's a quirky, almost comical image, but it hides a profound truth. Zhang Guo Lao is so old, he's seen it all before. For him, the future holds no surprises. It's just the past on a loop. He is the master of hindsight, a living embodiment of the phrase. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. He's just watching the rest of us repeat it in real time. His age was a complete mystery. He himself claimed to have been a minister to the mythical Emperor Yao, a ruler from the 3rd millennium BCE. Whether that was true or not, no one could say. But his legend was so great that mortal emperors in the Tang dynasty, centuries later, were obsessed with him. They would constantly summon him to the imperial court, hoping to learn his secrets. But Zhang Guo Lao was not a man you could control. He had zero interest in politics, power, or fame. When an invitation from the emperor became too insistent to ignore, he would often just die. He'd collapse, his body would begin to decay at an alarming rate, and his followers would bury him. The emperor would receive the news and mourn the loss of a great sage. And then a few weeks later, Zhang Guo Lao would be spotted, alive and well, wandering in the mountains hundreds of miles away. He used death as a convenient excuse to get out of meetings. And that donkey of his? It was just as magical. It was said to be able to travel thousands of miles in a single day without tiring. But the strangest part was what happened when he arrived at his destination. Zhang Guo Lao would dismount, and then fold the donkey up like a piece of paper, and slip it into his pocket or a small carrying case. When he wanted to ride again, he'd take out the paper donkey, splash it with a bit of water from his mouth, and it would spring back to its full size, ready to go. This wasn't just a party trick. It was a statement. To Zhang Guo Lao, the material world, with all its solid, dependable forms, was as transient and foldable as a piece of paper. Reality was malleable. The emperors tried everything to pin him down. Emperor Taizong and Emperor Gaozong of the Tang dynasty repeatedly invited him, but he always refused to show up. The formidable Empress Wu Zetian finally managed to get him to leave his hermitage, but he promptly played dead at the gate of a temple on his way to her. Finally, Emperor Xuanzong, a man deeply fascinated with Taoism and magic, managed to get Zhang Guo Lao to court. The emperor was in awe of him and showered him with questions and tests. He asked him about his past lives, about the secrets of the universe. Zhang Guo Lao would give cryptic, maddeningly vague answers. The emperor offered him a high-ranking ministerial position. Zhang declined. He offered him the hand of a royal princess in marriage. Zhang laughed and refused. The emperor, desperate to understand the source of his power, once asked a famous Taoist magician at court about Zhang's true identity. The magician hesitated, saying, "If I tell you, I will drop dead at your feet. But if you promise to go to him, barefoot and bareheaded, and beg for his forgiveness, I will be revived." The emperor agreed. The magician declared, "Zhang Guo Lao is an incarnation of a primordial white bat spirit." And as soon as he spoke the words, he fell to the ground dead. The emperor, shaken, did exactly as he promised. He went to Zhang Guo Lao, took off his hat and shoes, and begged for forgiveness for prying. Zhang simply sprinkled water on the magician's face, and he immediately came back to life. Zhang Guo Lao wasn't just an immortal. He was a force of nature, a living paradox who treated life and death as minor inconveniences. He was wisdom that refused to be weaponized, knowledge that couldn't be owned. But his greatest act of defiance, his most legendary display of power, came when the emperor asked him for the one thing all mortals truly crave, the secret to his longevity. He asked Zhang Guo Lao to demonstrate his magic, to prove his ancient age. And Zhang's response was so shocking, so utterly bizarre, it cemented his legend forever. In the silent, stunned throne room, facing the most powerful man on earth, Zhang Guo Lao did not offer a secret elixir. He did not whisper an ancient incantation. Instead, he simply smiled and fell to the floor. Not in a faint. He fell down dead. Right there on the polished marble, before the emperor and his entire court, the old master's body began to change. His skin, once ruddy with life, turned a ghastly gray, then a putrid black. The flesh began to liquefy, to slew off his bones, the unmistakable, horrifying stench of rapid decay filling the opulent hall. The courtiers gagged, turning away in disgust and terror. The emperor watched, pale and speechless, as the strange old man who claimed to be centuries old decomposed into a foul puddle in a matter of minutes. This wasn't a trick. It was a visceral, stomach-churning display of mortality. The emperor, shaken, ordered the remains to be buried with respect. But later, when his servants opened the coffin to prepare the body, they found it completely empty. And at that very same moment, miles away, high in the Hengshan Mountains, travelers reported seeing Zhang Guo Lao, alive and well, riding his white mule, backwards as always, without a care in the world. He had shown the emperor the ultimate secret of longevity. The understanding that the body is just a temporary vessel. To be truly immortal, you must first be willing to let it go completely. This level of detachment from the mortal world is a rare gift, one that another immortal, Han Xiangzi, struggled to explain to his very powerful, very practical uncle. You see, Han Xiangzi was born into a world of politics and ambition. His uncle was Han Yu, a real historical figure, one of the most famous poets and government officials in the entire Tang dynasty. Han Yu was a staunch Confucian, a man who believed in order, in duty, in studying the classics and passing the grueling civil service exams to serve the state. And he desperately wanted his talented, intelligent nephew to follow in his footsteps. But Han Xiangzi, he was different. He had no interest in bureaucracy or courtly intrigue. He was a dreamer, a musician, a seeker. He was drawn not to the teachings of Confucius, but to the mystical path of the Tao. His teacher was none other than Lu Dongbin, who recognized the boy's pure spirit. While his uncle was trying to drill him on classic literature, Han Xiangzi was learning to master the dizi, a Chinese bamboo flute. It was said that when he played, his music had the power to make flowers bloom in an instant and soothe the wildest of beasts. This, as you can imagine, drove his uncle insane. "You're wasting your life on this noise," he would thunder. "You could be a governor, a minister. Instead, you play with flutes and talk nonsense about the Tao." One winter, during a banquet at his uncle's estate, Han Yu decided to publicly shame his nephew. In front of all the guests, he demanded Han Xiangzi perform a feat to prove the supposed power of his Taoist magic. He sarcastically asked him to change the color of the wine in their cups. Han Xiangzi just smiled, and with a wave of his hand, turned all the wine into a magnificent, fragrant green brew. The guests gasped, but his uncle was not impressed. "A cheap parlor trick," he sneered. "Can your magic create something from nothing?" He pointed to the barren, snow-covered garden outside. "Make flowers bloom for me. Now." Han Xiangzi simply walked over to a pile of earth, covered it with a bowl, and after a few moments lifted it. There, sprouting from the frozen ground, was a stunning peony in full bloom, and on its delicate petals, written in perfect calligraphy, were 2 lines of a poem. "Clouds veil the Qin mountains, where is my home? Snows crowd the lawn pass, my horse cannot go on." His uncle read the lines and flew into a rage. "Nonsense! Gibberish! You mock me with your riddles." He threw his nephew out of the house, disowning him. But years later, Han Yu's fortunes turned. He wrote a memorial to the emperor criticizing Buddhism, a deeply unpopular opinion at the time, and was promptly stripped of his rank and exiled to a remote, southern outpost. As he was traveling, his path was blocked by a sudden freakish blizzard at the Lan Pass. The snow was so deep, his horse couldn't move. Freezing, starving, and alone, Han Yu despaired, believing he would die right there. And then through the swirling snow, a figure appeared. It was his nephew, Han Xiangzi. He calmly swept away the snow with his flute, created a warm fire out of thin air, and cooked a hot meal for his astonished uncle. It was only then, shivering in the snow, that Han Yu remembered the poem from the peony petals. "Clouds veil the Qin mountains, where is my home? Snows crowd the Lan Pass, my horse cannot go on." He finally understood. His nephew hadn't been mocking him. He had been seeing the future. He had been living on a plane of existence his uncle couldn't even comprehend. Han Xiangzi, the patron of musicians, had proven that the path of the spirit, the melody of the Tao, was a power far greater than any earthly ambition. While Han Xiangzi was a gentle soul trying to guide his family, our final immortal was a mystery to everyone. They were a walking, singing paradox. Their name was Lan Saiha, and to this day no one is sure if they were male or female. Sometimes depicted as a young boy, other times as a young woman, Lan Saiha was a wandering street performer, a seemingly mad beggar who defied all convention. They wore a tattered blue gown, always with one foot bare and the other shod in a single boot. In the summer, they would stuff their gown with cotton for warmth. In the dead of winter, they would sleep in the snow, their body giving off steam like a freshly cooked meal. They seemed to feel neither heat nor cold. Lan Saiha wandered the streets of China, carrying a basket of flowers and singing for money. But they weren't just singing for their supper. Their songs were wild, impromptu, and deeply philosophical. They sang about the foolishness of chasing wealth and fame, the fleeting nature of life, and the great cosmic joke of mortal existence. People would toss them coins, but Lan Saiha would often just thread them on a string and drag them along the ground, or give them away to the poor, never using the money for themselves. They were a living performance art piece, a constant public reminder of Taoist ideals. They were the court jester to the entire world, speaking profound truths that everyone else was too busy or too scared to acknowledge. Their origin was a total mystery. No one knew their family, where they came from, or even their true age. They appeared to be a teenager, but some claimed they had looked exactly the same for generations. They were a glitch in the system, an ageless, gender-fluid enigma who lived completely outside the rules of society. Their final act was just as bizarre as their life. One day, while performing in a tavern, Lan Saiha was said to have gotten drunk and began to sing and dance. Then, a crane descended from the sky on a swirl of clouds. Lan Saiha simply laughed, tossed their boot, their robe, and their castanets to the stunned onlookers, and leapt onto the crane's back, soaring up into the heavens until they disappeared from sight. They simply left. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. The 8 individuals, each so different, each having walked such a unique and arduous path to enlightenment, were now all immortals. The scholar, the general, the actor, the old man, the alchemist, the beautiful woman, the musician, and the wandering singer. They were a team of divine misfits, a celestial supergroup. And soon, they would be called to their first great adventure together. The call came from the highest echelons of heaven, from Xiangu, the Queen Mother of the West. She was hosting her legendary Peach Festival, an event that happened only once every several thousand years, when the peaches of immortality in her celestial garden finally ripened. To be invited was the greatest honor in the divine realm. All 8 of our heroes received an invitation. They journeyed to her palace on the mythical Mount Kunlun, where they feasted on the divine fruit and drank heavenly wine. After the banquet, filled with celestial energy and good cheer, they decided to travel home together. But their journey would take them across the vast and treacherous East Sea. Standing at the shore, looking out at the turbulent, monster-filled waters, Lu Dongbin turned to the others. He said, "The celestial authorities would surely give us a cloud to ride across. But where's the fun in that? We are the 8 immortals. Let us not take the easy way. Let us each use our own unique power, our own divine tool, to cross this great ocean." The other immortals, their eyes glinting with excitement, roared their approval. This was the spirit of their fellowship, a blend of divine power and playful human-like pride. One by one, they approached the churning waters of the East Sea. First was the elder Zhang Guo Lao. He smiled, his ancient eyes twinkling, and from his sleeve, he produced his trusty paper mule. He tossed it onto the waves, and where paper should have dissolved, it instead grew and solidified, becoming a sturdy vessel bobbing on the surface. He hopped aboard, stroking his long white beard with satisfaction. Next, the stately Lu Dongbin, ever the swordsman, drew his demon-slaying blade. With a flick of his wrist, he cast it into the sea. The sword didn't sink but floated, radiating a soft light, transforming into a sleek, swift bridge of energy upon which he walked as if on solid ground. Then came Iron Crutch Li. He leaned on his metal crutch, a symbol of his mortal suffering, and with a grunt, he cast his gourd into the ocean. The humble container bobbed once, then swelled to the size of a small boat, perfectly buoyant, ready to carry its master. The gentle Xiangu stepped forward, holding her single lotus blossom. She placed it delicately on the water's surface, and the petals unfolded, creating a beautiful, fragrant pink raft that seemed to calm the very waves it touched. Following her, Lan Saiha, the youthful singer, tossed their flower basket into the sea. It spun and grew, becoming a surprisingly robust little coracle, dancing atop the whitecaps. Han Xiangzi, the musician, didn't hesitate. He laid his jade flute upon the water, and it became a miniature dragon boat, sleek and elegant. Finally, Chao Guozhou, the former royal, cast his jade tablet, a symbol of his courtly past. It spread out like a royal barge, flat and stable, a platform of pure imperial authority on the wild sea. With a final triumphant shout, Zhongli Quan, the leader of the group, threw his great feathered fan onto the ocean. It expanded into a massive feathery raft, large enough to hold an army, and he stepped aboard, his laughter booming across the water. 8 individuals, 8 unique powers, 8 makeshift vessels, all bobbing on the vast, unforgiving expanse of the East Sea. They journeyed like this, a strange and wonderful flotilla, laughing and telling stories. But their divine powers, unleashed all at once, were not without consequence. The energy radiating from their magical tools churned the water, creating massive, unnatural waves that plunged deep into the ocean, all the way down to the crystal palace of Aoguang, the Dragon King of the East Sea. Inside his magnificent underwater kingdom, the Dragon King was thrown from his coral throne. The pillars of his palace trembled. "What is this disturbance?" he roared, his voice like the grinding of tectonic plates. "Who dares to disrupt the tranquility of my domain?" His shrimp soldiers and crab generals scurried, reporting that a group of sorcerers was crossing the sea on strange magical items, showing blatant disrespect for his authority. The Dragon King's pride, as vast and deep as the ocean itself, was wounded. Enraged, he commanded his third son, the warrior Prince Aobing, to capture the trespassers and bring them to him for judgment. A massive whirlpool suddenly formed in the center of the Immortals flotilla. The water churned violently, and from the depths emerged the Dragon King's army, a terrifying sight of armored prawns, spear-wielding fishmen, and warriors riding giant sea serpents. At their head was the Dragon Prince, his scales shimmering, his eyes burning with cold fury. The Immortals were caught by surprise. In the ensuing chaos, the Dragon Prince saw his chance. He targeted the youngest and seemingly most vulnerable of the group, Lan Saiha. A powerful current, commanded by the prince, swept Lan Saiha from their flower basket, dragging them down into the depths, a captive of the Dragon Kingdom. The remaining 7 immortals watched in horror as their companion disappeared beneath the waves. The playful challenge had turned deadly serious. A cold fury hotter than any fire ignited in the heart of Zhongli Quan. "They have taken one of us," he bellowed, his voice cracking like thunder. "The Dragon King has made a grave mistake. He has mistaken our playfulness for weakness. He will learn the true power of the 8 immortals today." What followed was a battle of mythological proportions. The sea itself became a weapon. Lu Dongbin unsheathed his sword, and with a single slash he parted the waters, creating a dry chasm that reached toward the Crystal Palace. Iron Crutchley uncorked his gourd, and from it spewed not medicine, but a torrent of divine fire that turned the very sea to steam, scalding the Dragon King's soldiers. He Xiangu threw her lotus, and it bloomed into a massive shield, deflecting the magical attacks of the sea folk. Han Xiangzi raised his flute to his lips, but this time, he played a melody not of peace but of war. The sound waves vibrated through the water, disorienting the enemy, causing their formations to break in confusion. Chao Guojiu held up his jade tablet, and its imperial authority projected a force that calmed the raging whirlpools and pushed back the tides. Zhang Guo Lao sent his paper mule diving into the depths, where it transformed into a real, kicking steed that scattered the shrimp soldiers like pebbles. And at the center of it all was Zhongli Quan. He waved his great fan, and with each sweep he summoned hurricane-force winds that created tidal waves, smashing them back against the Dragon King's own forces. The combined power of the 7 was overwhelming. They were no longer just individuals showing off. They were a unified force, an unstoppable celestial storm. They fought their way to the gates of the Crystal Palace itself. The Dragon King, seeing his army decimated and his palace under siege, knew he had vastly underestimated these surface dwellers. Terrified, he surrendered, releasing Lan Saiha and offering a profound apology to the immortals. Having rescued their friend and taught the arrogant Dragon King a lesson in humility, the 8 immortals reassembled on the surface. The sea was calm once more. They had faced their greatest challenge as a group and had emerged victorious. Their bonds forged anew in the crucible of battle. They completed their journey across the sea, not just as powerful individuals, but as a true family. And this perhaps is the ultimate meaning of the 8 immortals. Their story isn't just a collection of fascinating origin myths. It is a single powerful statement about humanity itself. Look at who they are. A general, a scholar, a beggar, a maiden, a musician, a royal, an elder, a youth. They represent everyone, the rich and the poor, the man and the woman, the powerful and the marginalized, the old and the young. Their stories tell us that the path to transcendence, to becoming something more, isn't reserved for a select few. It's available to anyone, regardless of their station in life. Each of them achieved immortality not through birthright, but through action, through perseverance, through compassion, through overcoming the flaws and hardships of their mortal lives. The famous tale of them crossing the sea, Bāxiān, has become a proverb in Chinese culture. It means each one revealing their own special powers. It's a celebration of individuality, a reminder that every person possesses a unique skill, a special tool that they can use to navigate the turbulent oceans of life. But the story doesn't end there. When one of them was captured, their individual powers were not enough. They had to unite, to combine their strengths, to become something greater than the sum of their parts. And that is the final, most profound lesson. While our individual talents can carry us far, it is only by working together, by fighting for each other, that we can overcome the truly insurmountable challenges, that we can face down the dragons that lurk in the depths. For over 1,000 years, the Eight Immortals have endured. They are not distant, perfect gods on a golden throne. They are flawed, relatable, and deeply human figures who achieved the divine. They are patrons of the common person, a timeless symbol of hope, a vibrant tapestry of Chinese culture, and a powerful reminder that within every one of us, no matter our background, lies the potential for immortality, the potential to cross any sea, and to master our own fate.